Thank you very much, and I'm actually thankful to Madresh for bringing me last. Because it does flow in. So Lado Sikaka is an elder from Nyamgiri, and I like to refer to his perspective because often solutions are found depending on how you frame problems. And if you ask the bankers to frame the problem, they'll frame it in a certain way. But if you ask Lado Sikaka, he will tell you that the bankers are the problem. So here I just wanted to start with a short kind of a video by where Sikaka speaks. It's just a 1.5 minute video.
যদি সেটা সরকারি নিয়মগিরি তৈয়ার করি নাই কি পানি তৈয়ার করি নাই কি কেন্দ্র সরকার রাজ্য সরকার তৈয়ার করি প্রজাকে সপ্লাই করছে এই ডঙ্গিয়া বন্ধ বলি করি পারাম্পরিক প্রবৃত্তি জাতি ধর্ম করি করি নিয়ম রোজামকে সপ্লাই করছে পৌঁছে দেଉଛି ଆମେ କଲେ ତାକେ ସରକାର ହେଉଛି ଆମେ ଗୁଟୁ ଦେଇକରି ମନ୍ତ୍ରିମଣ୍ଡଳ କଲାକୁ ମନ୍ତ୍ରିମଣ୍ଡଳ ହେଇକରି ଆମର ସାଧାରଣ ଲୋକକୁ ମାରିଦେବ ପାହାଡ଼କୁ ମାରିଦେବ ଆମର ଜନ ଶପଥ ନେଇକରି ସେଟା ଲୁଟେଇ ନେବ সেটা সরকার আইনের আছে সরকার আইনের তো ଅଛି যে সে লোকକୁ বচাইব দেশକୁ বচাইব মা মাটিକୁ পানি পବ ସବୁ বচাଇବା ପାଇଁ ସରକାର ଆଇনের ଅଛି ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କୁ ମାରି ଦେବାଟା ସରକାରକୁ ଆଇনের ଅଛି ଏଠି ଆମର ନିୟମଗିରି ପାହାଡ଼ ଜଙ୍ଗଲରେ ବାଘ ଭାଲୁ ପଶୁ ପକ୍ଷୀ ନର ନାରୀ ଦେବୀ ଦେବତା ପଶୁ ପକ୍ଷୀ ସାଥୀ ମାଟି ସବୁ ବଞ୍ଚି ଯାଉଛି ଏକୁ ପାଣି ହେଲେ ସେଟା ରହିପାରିବ ନିୟମଗିରି ଆମେ ଡଙ୍ଗିଆ ପଦ ଲୋକ ମରବ ନାହିଁ ଏ ପୂର୍ତ୍ତି ଲୋକ ଦେଶ ଲୋକ ସବୁ ମରିଯିବ ନାଗାବାଲି ଗଛ ତାର ସବୁ ବୁଡ଼ିଯିବ ସେଟା ସରକାର ଜାଣି ନାହିଁ ଏତେ ଖଣି କଲେ ଆମେ ରାଜା ଦେଶ ଲୋକକୁ ମାରି କରି ଆମେ ଉପରେ ଉଡ଼ିଯିବା ବୋଲୁଛି এটা ষড়যন্ত্র মুখ্যমন্ত্রী প্রধানমন্ত্রী ষড়যন্ত্ରରେ নিয়মগিରି ଖଣି ଖୋଲା ଯାଉ ବୋଲି କହୁଛି କେମିତି ଖୋଲାଯିବ ଆମେ ଦେଖିବୁ মা মাটি পা আমি কাহাକୁ ডরবো না সরকার ডরবো না কাহাକୁ ডরবো না নিজে আমার পেটর পাই নাই সমস্ত পেটর পাই সমস্ত পশু পক্ষী পেটর পাই বচবা পাই আমি পাহাড়କୁ বচলে যুগ যুগ রই পারবো পাহাড় ন বচলে অদা বেলে মরিଯିବ ବୋଲି ଆମେ লড়াই করছি আন্দোলন করছি সংগ্রাম করছি কোন করবো সরকার
So that basically sets a kind of a tone because here we're talking about all life forms. He's talking about the mountain which sustains the rivers Nagavali and Vansadhara. And if you look at it, these are all landscapes where there's a flow of energy. He's talking about the disruption of the flow of energy as the looting of their wealth. So as I said, I mean, the perspective matters as to who defines the problem. Actually, this whole thing about solar power, wind power, all this came in because the problem of the ecological problem was kind of narrowed into climate change as the biggest crisis. And the climate change was then narrowed into a problem of excess carbon in the atmosphere. And the root cause, the villain of the masterpiece, is coal and other fossil fuel. Electricity generation is the main consumer. And therefore, if you change your electricity generation patterns, you will be able to solve the world's problems. Besides the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which has published quite a long series of extremely boring reports, including the one that I recently read about 4 or 5 days ago. I mean, it's amazing how such a colorful, catastrophic story can be made so dull and boring. But there's another report called the Intergovernmental Science Platform, Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, which has gone well beyond just the climate issue and has identified, as it stands, land use change as the primary driver. Of course, climate change is very quickly taking over and also influencing land use change. So climate change as a phenomenon is not something to be laughed at. But at the same time, there's another thing that is very, very important for communities, local communities, and that is land use change, and Bhargavi spoke quite a bit about it. Over the last 30 years and definitely the last 15 years that I've been working on with communities that have been fighting against electricity generation projects, I've never actually really used climate science or climate change as an argument locally. Neither have the local people, because they're not necessarily fighting coal or solar. they're fighting degrading land use change. And anything that does not degrade land use change is not something that they would contest. And the reason why they're fighting degrading land use change is because they see land and the kind of use or the new use that is sought to be introduced as a disruption of energy flows that help them survive and sustain themselves. So one of the things that's been talked about over here is investment, and globally, I think we've forgotten this whole issue of ecological debt. That the problem that we currently have is it is not as if it's a human-induced climate change. It is some human-induced climate change. It's a lifestyle of a few that has come and that has brought us to this pass. But the entire blame is to be shared with all of humanity, and I think that is not correct. And in this, now all of a sudden, the same investments that have caused this disaster to happen, and the same investors are being called upon to invest in the alternatives rather than shifting it as a debt. The discussion and the demands for debt repayment have actually not really taken off for obvious reasons. The Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, actually, I like that report because it says it as it should. And it says that the current limited paradigm of economic growth, within which all these investments that we're talking about markets, about enabling things for solar to take off or something else, that current limited paradigm of economic growth is one of the biggest problems, and we need to steer away from it. How we do it, we don't know because we've not really asked that question. I don't even think there's a consensus that we do need to. The second paradigm shift is that energy is not just electricity, and we seem to be preoccupied with that. I'm glad that the earlier two speakers definitely spoke about that. And to my mind, what's on the right-hand side is the solar park, but this is what is considered to be the solar park, something that obliterates the actual grassland, which is a very vital ecosystem, far more efficient in sequestering carbon. So it sequesters carbon and stores it underground. Even fires do not release that carbon. And above ground, you have energy in the form of renewable energy in the form of biomass. That has been wiped out. And now you have these glass and steel structures, which are called solar parks. So I think that's, again, a mind shift that is required to look at landscapes as energy flows and as sources of renewable energy. So we have something to be proud of in India. Virtually everything that is called development is something that somebody is upset about, and people are fighting against the bullet train, which will, of course, cut across mangrove forests in Thane. You have the hydrocarbon extraction, where farmers and other people in Tamil Nadu are fighting against the ONGC and Vedanta's plans to extract hydrocarbon from the Kaveri Delta. Coal mining in Hasdeo Forest. Hasdeo Forest, again, if you need to get rid of the forest in order to get to the coal. And again, it's a matter of either bringing out the coal and generating electricity or something else from that and using that as energy, or seeing the forest as an energy generator itself in terms of biomass, in terms of forest produce, and in terms of water, and so on. So this is a word that has been fascinating me for the last 15 years. The word Purambok actually is used as a curse word in Madras. So if you go out and call somebody a Purambok, it means you're calling that person a useless, worthless person. And it also is used to refer to spaces that are considered useless and worthless, and so you imbue or you kind of inject new value in it by building a solar park on top of the grassland or a scrubland. And as a pejorative, it refers to both to landscapes and to people. And usually people who live off these kinds of landscapes are also considered to be engaged in Purambok economies or useless economies, and all of them have to be then converted into IT engineers to be seen as valuable. So what we're seeing is actually a battle of value and worth. What we value, what we consider worthy, and what we consider worthless has a lot to do with how our development has shaped our thinking. Because in our thinking, development means only one thing, and it can only come in one way. It is by covering open earth with concrete, steel, or asphalt. And so when we talk about infrastructure, immediately our mind goes to bridges and flyovers and dams and power plants. It does not look at the lower right-hand side as an infrastructure. In fact, that's a very special kind of a complex habitat, Shola grasslands, which is endemic to the Western Ghats and the Palni Hills. This is from the Palni Hills. And these grasslands are great water factories. they are biodiversity reserves. But that is not considered to be an infrastructure because it is unbuilt, it is communally owned, and the assets are all hidden to educated eyes. On the left-hand side, you have buildings that's considered to be desirable. It is high value because it is built, it is private, and most of the liabilities that are caused by buildings are hidden, and I'll come to that in a bit. So places like Chennai, I mean, we are in a great place to discuss this because this is the disaster capital of the world. We limp from one disaster to another. So right now, we are in, I don't know what disaster phase, but soon we will be in either flood phase or no water phase. We came from a no water phase, I think we're still in that. And then we have a heat wave, we have cyclones. So we just move from one to another. And that's also because cities are not just Chennai, but cities around the world, including the cities in the west and the industrial areas north, are places where climate change and land use change collide to give us the disaster that urban centers have become. So this is an image of Chennai. It's a flat terrain, cannot get flooded. Hydrologically, it is not designed to be flooded. It cannot get flooded. And one of the reasons why, in order to settle in Chennai, all those blue dots were made. None of those blue dots, only the blue lines are natural. Those are the drainage. So on the northern part, you have the Kosasthalayar River, which ends up in Ennur Creek. I'll talk about that in a bit. This is the Kuam River, the Stinky that you cross as you go near the Marina Beach. And this is Adyar River, very close to here. All the blue dots are human-made structures. They are irrigation tanks or aeries or ponds. And these structures were built because water does not like to stay in Chennai. It likes to run away through these drains. And so if you want to build a settlement, you have to carve out some space for water to stay. And water's habit is to fall from the skies, move by gravity, again energy, and which moves by gravity beneath the ground and moves by gravity over the ground, runs into these water structures, and the surplus flows out through the rivers into the Bay of Bengal. What we did is, this is a very large water body called the Pallikarnai marshland, and it's 50 square kilometers. It drains an area, a catchment area of about 250 square kilometers. And this is all classified as Kariveli Porambok or floodplains. And water stays there almost throughout the year if you let it stay. About 10 years ago, it's in 2005, the government of Tamil Nadu decided to carve out about 365 acres of this marshland and handed it over to ELCOT for setting up a special economic zone in Sholiganallur. That's what you see over here. And now you have LEED certified buildings. I mean, this is how silly it gets. You have people educated in America and other places, and they do this LEED certified to feel really good about themselves. And for Mahindra Infotech, which is located in there, they have gold certification. And in that, I looked through the criteria, and they have water efficient landscaping. It's 4 out of 4 is what they've been awarded. Wipro also has its office over there. Again, it is LEED gold. All these guys got flooded out, and Wipro actually handed over 1 crore as a check to Chief Minister Jayaraman after the floods. And I don't know whether there's penalty or whether it's a charity, but it's somewhere in between. This is, again, I picked the example of IT because it is a new value. It is also considered to be the knowledge corridor, which means the smart people are the ones who are working over there. So this is a very large recharge zone. So when you talk about rainwater harvesting, which the Chief Minister has told us that we are to blame for the water scarcity because we don't harvest rainwater in our rooftops. The rooftops are, unlike the solar, I think the rooftops don't matter. Your landscape is your rainwater harvesting infrastructure. It is not being seen as that. So if you look at this area, all the white is sand. So this is a fantastic rainwater harvesting area. All the black that you see spreading out like tentacles are the water courses. So you have water rushing in from 3 sides. It drains a catchment that is all around it. And that water sinks in, and then whatever is left goes out and is drained out through the Buckingham Canal. This is the Siruseri Aquifer Recharge Zone. On the right-hand side, you have the Siruseri IT SEZ, including the Chennai Mathematical Institute. The smartest people have built their institute inside an extremely valuable rainwater harvesting area. What is ironic is many of these buildings boast rainwater harvesting credentials on their signboards just outside. So the reason why I'm highlighting this in this talk about energy is because here you have lost your energy. You lost the ability to have very low energy water by just digging a shallow well and taking the water from there. And now these people have to get water from tankers, which bring in water from Palar Basin, much further south, about 70 kilometers south, by sucking out the groundwater. It's a hugely expensive and very vulnerable. Of course, now we're also inviting the seawater coming in. Yeah, this is just a slide that says that what you call growth, I call decline. Chennai grew from 47 square kilometers to 402 square kilometers built up area in 30 years. At the same time, your area under wetland decreased from 186 square kilometers to 71.5. So depending on the point of view, you're either growing or declining. So this is a place that Pooja talked about. It's an unfortunate place where 3 Government of India hashtags converge. It's Make in India, Smart City, Sagarmala, and this is a place where what we have is a very important natural infrastructure for a variety of economies and also for a variety of other ways in which you can perceive energy is being replaced. So this is the 8,000 acres that Pooja talked about, and all the red and black and blue and yellow stuff that you see are all encroachments built inside the no development zone of the Ennur Creek. This is the NTPC power plant. This is the ash pond of the NTPC power plant. This is the ash pond of the North Chennai Thermal Power Station. This is the coal yard that she talked about, the 10 million tons per annum. And there's the BPCL and HPCL's oil storage terminals, all located inside the river where people fish. The right-hand side images have already been shared by Pooja. And in this place, no story is complete without Adani. So just north of the Ennur wetland complex is an even larger wetland complex that belongs to the Kattupalli and Pulicat system. And here, as you can see, it's close to about 6,111 acres are sought to be acquired by Adani, out of which what MGD was talking about, the 2,000 acres reclaimed from the sea, and another 2,000 acres of wetlands, coastal tidal wetlands, to be reclaimed from the western side. What you have in between is the Kattupalli Barrier Island. The entire landscape has been described as waste and barren, repeatedly. And this is an area that's just layered with uses. So what we have over here is all the different land uses. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different land uses that have been identified by local communities. So to an untrained eye, particularly to very highly educated eyes, that place looks like an open, unused land. But when you go and talk to the local communities, they talk about multiple layers of use for the same plot of land. Yeah, there's supposed to be one more slide. It's supposed to be animated, but didn't happen. So let me describe this animation. This beautiful face is supposed to come after first. The first kind of geographical feature over there is the Kattupalli Barrier Island, which is sand dunes. And dunes are very important, one, to kind of retard or reduce the velocity, the energy of the winds that come in during cyclones. And this allows for agriculture on the leeward side of the dunes. Second, because dunes are very large deposits of sand, they absorb the fresh water and create a barrier under the ground, which kind of battles with the sea and prevents the seawater from moving into the groundwater aquifers. So it's almost like the border security force, or the first line of defense that we have. Next, on the western side, we have tidal marshland. And this marshland, again, is a very important, if you're looking at it from a climate point of view and very, very interested in carbon, then yes, it's a carbon sequesterer. Besides that, it also has tremendous value as the source of fisher livelihoods and number of other livelihoods. But also the brackish water ecosystem over there is a gradient, a salinity gradient from east to west. So it moves from very salty to fresh. And this tidal water body actually has a salinity gradient that allows for the freshwater resources in the Aranyar-Kosastalayar basin to remain fresh by retarding the salinity intrusion. And the third feature over here, of course, is a large Pulicat lake ecosystem. So all these three features are now sought to be replaced by just one feature. So biodiversity gone and single monoculture, which is the Adani port that is supposed to come up over there. So I call these things false solutions for a variety of reasons. And one of the things that really gets my goat is these images of windmills running and solar power and smiling sunflowers as an image of the future of tomorrow. These are, I think, false solutions, primarily because climate change itself as a articulation of a problem sets itself up to be a technologically intervened kind of a framework. So you can solve this problem technologically without disturbing the status quo. And if you can intervene without disturbing the status quo, then that intervention is a false solution and is probably not worth having, because the status quo itself is a problem. I'm talking about the power relations. And these kinds of false solutions are discriminatory. They're only possible in unequal societies. So if I look at desalination plants as opposed to healing the landscapes in order to get water, desalination plants are located in invisible communities and cause harm to invisible people and invisible environments like the sea. You also have these false solutions making an entry. When you call for a climate emergency, we can bring in a whole bunch of false solutions like solar and wind without looking at the context. I think the context was very beautifully set out also by Raghu. Do these technologies have a role to play? Certainly. But how and in what cases, those things have to be discussed. Also, the real solutions are always pushed. There's an American phrase called low-hanging fruit. And we've been going for low-hanging fruit for the last 300 years. Nobody wants to get to the high-hanging fruit, because the low-hanging fruit can be obtained without disturbing the status quo. So how do you identify false solutions? Extremely complex problem, a very simple solution. Climate change, solar power, or renewable energy. The second is this whole externalizing, where somebody else bears the consequences of what you call a solution. And here, of course, we come up with this whole classic thing, is if you want an omelette, then you got to break an egg. But the question is, whose egg are we breaking, and who gets to eat the omelette? Maintaining status quo, I've already talked to you about this. So it's basically you're told that you can continue with your wasteful consumption and your overconsumption. That will not be questioned. We will continue to figure out whether we can just replace coal with solar. And finally, most of these interventions take the form of techno fixes, which replace the local with the global. It replaces democracy with technology, and it replaces wise solutions with smart interventions. Thank you.